All right, welcome. Ridley, we'll start with you. We normally do. We're gonna have to mix this up shortly. But you had a big announcement today. I had a reporter, I think, from Smart Company just asking me about it just then.
Sure.
So tell us, for those that missed it this morning, what was that announcement? Just to reiterate.
Bless you. A few more people in the room right now than there were at 9:15 this morning, which is great. There might have been a few sore heads and a few slow to get out of bed. But essentially, the AO Art Ball project, we announced this morning that everyone who owns an AO Art Ball from AO22, so the existing collection, will be entitled to claim a pair of 7-day complimentary ground passes to the AO23. We'll also, thank you. So we've had amazing support locally with this project from the team at NFT Fest and so many Melbourne supporters and so many local fans of the AO that we felt that it was appropriate to announce it here this morning to a local crowd. So once again, thanks to the guys at NFT Fest for helping facilitate that, and it's been a great day. A lot of super positive feedback and really enjoyed chatting with so many people about it throughout the day.
Absolutely. We'll come back to you in a sec, Rid, because I want to sort of get more onto the 2023 AO Art Ball project. But we will throw over to you, Joan. You've obviously been involved with some of our past conferences, and we thank you for that. But recently, you did have your first mint heading up Cricket Australia's Web3 strategy. Just give us a little bit of an overview of your role within CA, but also what you've done recently with your mint at Cricket.
Yeah, so I sit in the media rights team at CA. So technically, my day job is meant to be looking after broadcast negotiations, but my passion is the sport tech and innovation space, and so I drag cricket, sometimes kicking and screaming, into this arena. And so I took the lead on the NFT project, spun it as a media right, because we were going to go with video moments first, just so that I could own the project, to be honest. We spent the last probably year and a half building what the program will look like. I'll say a lot of that was just deciding how things would work between CA and the Players Association, because we knew that was a really critical relationship to build as we moved into this space, just because so much of our really great, valuable content involves the players and their image and likeness. And so yes, we launched our platform on the 13th of October. It's called Crick Rush. You can find it at crickrush.cricket.com.au. It is Cricket Australia's digital collectible program. We actually are pretty specific to stay away from using NFT as an acronym. I think we've taken the approach that we want to use this platform to pull cricket fans into Web3 and into the metaverse. So trying to go to a place where they're fairly comfortable, so using fiat and not having to create too much of a cumbersome wallet experience, and then bring them into the metaverse. So as we kind of grow over time, we can bring everyone with us. And so really thrilled with the work that we've done. I think when we did the deal initially was a completely different time in Web3, as everybody knows, and we thought, oh yeah, everything's great. We're going to go with these video moments. They'll go for tons and tons of money and everyone will be happy. And then obviously the market's just not that anymore. And so really proud of the team that we work with, that we pivoted really quickly and said we need to have utility from the get-go. And so within a matter of months, they built an online strategy game. So it's a 3-card strategy game that you can play using the digital collectible player trading cards that we're making. And so from the moment that we launched, there was a live marketplace and there were active games across the T20 World Cup where you could use our cards to play, and it was a play to earn, win prizes. And yeah, so we've had several drops across the World Cup. We've done a WBBL drop for our women's players, and we're getting geared up for the BBL.
Amazing. Jards, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Give it up for Jards flying down. Love it. You joined us a couple of weeks ago on a Monday night in the road to NFT Fest Spaces, and I was personally really impressed from what I was hearing, and it sounds like you've been a DGen sort of on the side for a while, and now you're sort of heading up product at the NRL and looking after the Web3 strategy. Talk us through where you are in the process of sort of getting something live within the NRL.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Greg, and thank you, Victoria. We don't typically get welcomes like that at the NRL down here in AFL land, so thank you. Yeah, it's been really interesting for us as an organisation, and we spoke about this a little bit in the spaces because we haven't mentioned much about what we're doing in terms of the Web3 space at the moment. And a part of the reason for that is because one of the first things that we needed to do as an organisation is actually decide whether or not we believed, fundamentally, that Web3 was, for us, going to be either a product or a movement. We had to understand which one it was going to be for us, and we had to get that right and make a really conscious decision about it. And the reason we needed to make that decision was because what you do at the end of the day in terms of what you give to your fans probably hinges on whether or not you've defined Web3 as a product or a movement. A product typically would have product market fit established. You've probably got a few people that you're targeting when you treat it like a product. And on the other hand, if you treat it like a movement, what you're actually saying is, well, no, this is going to be for everyone in our fan base. So we have products like fantasy and tipping, right? Like these are things that we have that are made for a certain type of NRL fan, like your super fan. Whereas we also have things like Women in League round, Indigenous round. We would maybe call those movements or initiatives, even though they're about a specific set of people. Like we want everyone to go on that journey for us. And having established that we needed to make a decision about how we were going to treat that, it was important for us to get that right, because the only challenge sometimes when you treat Web3 like a product more than a movement is that in some ways you're almost preaching to the converted, like you're preaching to the Web3 natives. And so we just had to make a decision about what we were going to do. Did we want to treat Web3 as an organization, as a product or a movement? And that's kind of where we're at a little bit right now.
And give us your backstory in sport before NRL. Basketball, was it?
Yeah. So I started off in the NRL, but at a club level. That was almost my first real job out of high school. And after that, I had the opportunity to come down here to Melbourne, down at Albert Lake, actually working at Basketball Australia. So I led the digital team there for about 3.5 years. And then after being at Basketball Australia for 3.5 years, I went over to Fox Sports. So I went back to Sydney and I headed up the Fox Sports digital team for, I think, 5 years after that. And I tried my best to get out of sports because I looked at my resume and my wife looked at my resume and she's like, man, you don't look like a tech person, you look like a sports person. And that was a red flag for me. So got out of sports for a little bit, but I guess it has its way of calling its people back. And so I'm a relative new starter to the NRL. Only been there for just over a few months, but this conversation has heated up pretty quickly since being there.
Amazing. Rid, back over to you. I mean, one of the decisions sports have had to make and continue to have to make is who are you actually sort of targeting with your NFT or Web3 offering? Can you sort of talk us through the thought process and eventually what you came up with the AO Art Ball and sort of what that target was for you?
Yeah, so for us it was very much about targeting a Web3 native audience. That was pretty much the decision that we came to, because back in November when we started the project, we were moving so quickly. We literally had probably 6 to 8 weeks with Christmas and New Year's sort of thrown in the middle before the AO started in Jan. So the quickest route to market that we saw was targeting a natural sort of NFT native or Web3 native, and we saw the opportunities through collaborations with the likes of NFTs, who I know there's a heap of guys in the room here today, and our friends from MetaKey as well were unbelievable in helping to onboard a lot of Web3 natives into our project. And I think the way that we used data and artwork and sort of elements that were native as well, so say that word again, that were more natural and native to that Web3 community that they could understand, as opposed to it just being tennis and tennis moments, I think it was the right direction to go. As we continue to grow the project into the next few years, we definitely want to flip that model a little bit, because as we continue to add utility to the project, I think the people that are going to benefit most from that are tennis fans. So we want to start, like Joan said, start bringing tennis fans into the project, onboarding them. I think we all know that there's big issues with the onboarding of regular fans into the Web3 space. So we want to work with people like Collective Shift, who are an event sponsor here at the moment, to help onboard tennis fans back into our project so they can get the benefits of the utility that will come with it.
Amazing. And I mean, one of the things that sports always has an issue with is sort of who owns the rights and things like that, and navigating, player managers and the whole works. Can you talk to sort of the decision, and how that impacted the AO Art Ball decision? And then I'll throw to you, Joan, to also speak on that.
Yeah, the tennis fraternity is a bit of a mess, to be honest. There's no player association that governs all the players. You've got the ITF that governs globally, the ATP for the men's tour, and the WTA for the women's tour. Then you've got 4 Grand Slams that sit under those, and hundreds of unique events that sit underneath those. Then you've got players that are managed by their mum, their dad, their brother, major agencies, CAA, Octagon, IMG, the likes. So we found out very quickly that we weren't able to commercialise a player's IP on their behalf. We would have to go to every individual player and have them release their IP and ability to commercialise that. As I said, in 6 to 8 weeks, that would have been an impossible task. So yeah, we had to think outside the box, and what that actually meant was, how do we use data? How do we use art? How do we use the technology and move away from moments? And I think that was really advantageous to us, that we had to think super creatively. And yeah, it was really one of those moments where I think everyone had thought we would do an NBA Top Shot 2.0, and that was going to be for tennis. And then we very quickly realised that we couldn't do that, and yeah, it ended up working out pretty well for us.
Amazing. Joan, do you want to speak on?
Yeah, so we obviously took like the opposite approach, and you were right, because 6 to 8 weeks for us was like 6 to 8 months of discussing with the Players Association of how we would have everything laid out. I think we recognized early on that one of the things that we have that we connect with fans so well is the legacy of cricket and some of these really iconic moments and these iconic characters that we have in the history and that we're currently building as new players come through. And so we wanted the players to be really involved. We wanted their buy-in. And so we actually set this whole program up kind of outside of all of the normal arrangements that we have with players. We tried to kind of do something a bit new, and really happy that we did, because now we can say we have like 100% buy-in from every single contracted player that's playing. So we know that over the course of the summer, every single Australian cricketer will get an NFT of themselves made through one of the competitions that they're playing in. And for me, that's really important to have them on board, and I can't wait until it starts to ramp up and they can start talking about it amongst themselves and kind of seeing that organic growth. And so obviously it took a lot of consideration of who owns the rights, or as opposed to then who needs to be consulted or have approvals processes in order to monetize those rights. And so we took our time, but I think it'll be worth it in the end. And the other thing that we did that I think is a little bit different from a lot of other sports is we have carved out a space where if players want to come and create NFTs on our platform that have nothing to do with cricket or their cricketing lives, they're more than welcome to do that. And so if they want to showcase their artwork or music or anything else that they want to have out into the metaverse, we welcome them to come and do that on the platform with us. So it's a kind of non-exclusively, they can happily go and do it on other platforms or build their own, but we wanted to give every player the access to this kind of ability to connect with the fans and really leverage that connection as they grow their careers.
Amazing. Now, Jarge, you might not be able to talk too much to that.
No, I definitely can talk about it.
Okay, all right.
It's actually been the most robust part of the conversation that we've had at the NRL. And part of the reason that it's tricky is because what we ultimately want to achieve for all of our fans is we want to achieve mass adoption. But mass adoption in technology has typically only followed technology that has made someone's life a little bit easier in some way, shape, or form. And even though there's really good scalable web3 solutions to that, I think the use cases for that right now for us is a little bit tricky in the entire NFT space. Like, what real life problem are being solved by the blockchain at the moment? A little bit trickier to kind of get through, but and look, we have focus groups to try and help us understand, what are the barriers for our fans for Web3. And the two things that have come up more than anything else is that the two big barriers that we're trying to push through at the moment is the perception of the space itself, and then secondly, the process to actually get your first wallet going. And so anytime we're talking about what we would like to do, we're always coming back to those two things: perception and process. Is what we want to do going to aid one of our fans through this perception of the game and through the process? And I think once we broadly nail that onboarding piece, and once we identify some of the real life problems that can be solved by NFTs, that's when I think that mass adoption will come. So some of the mentality that we have, we talk about utility a lot in this space, and I think my personal view when I hear utility is that I feel as though in a lot of projects that are around, what we have are projects that are well-intended projects that have created these Web3 assets and retrofitted Web2 value into it. And so, the conversation is, what in real life experience or thing can we give this holder for buying or holding one of our assets? And I think we maybe have that the wrong way around if we want a mass adoption. What we should be saying is, what Web3 asset will we give people for owning one of these jerseys that they have, that they wear to the game, that they've like had their whole life? What can we do for that? And we think if we approach it that way, it might be easier to kind of push through some of that perception and process stuff.
Let's stay on perception. I mean, every interview that I've done for the last week with media has started with FTX, right? And you have to move people away from the difference between what you're talking about with the announcement you had this morning, Reid, and what's happening with the centralized exchange over here. Where do you think you're at with, and I'm going to ask all three of you, your collective sort of fan base when they hear the word NFT or Web3? Like, do you think that it's 10%, 20%, 30% that are open to it? Like, what's your feel on it?
So I think we've been asking about it for the last few months in kind of our fan data tracker that we do. And so we have about like 20 to 30% of fans that are interested, open, a smaller percentage of fans who are like actively, in the NFT space. I think the one thing I will say, we've been really conscious from like the CA socials point of view and what we've been putting out, not to use NFT, to talk about them as digital collectibles and try to kind of get people into the program rather than into NFTs. And we felt like the feedback we've gotten from the public just on comments has actually been pretty good, pretty positive, as opposed to one of our players who's an ambassador for our program, when he did one of his initial posts, he said NFTs, and then there was this kind of slew of, what are you doing to the environment?
Yeah.
Like, how could you expose people to this kind of risk? All of this stuff. And so I guess we've skirted the issue in that, like, we know that there's not a lot of risk because, the way we've set the program up, we're not asking people to get, buy coins or anything like that. And so we've just kind of not had that open conversation. Like, we're happy to chat about it if people have questions, but we've taken the approach of what we're really building is a blockchain-enabled loyalty program where we can get fans closer to the game, closer to the players, have these really incredible kind of delight and surprise moments that you really could never do in Web 2. So for the ODIs this last week, Saturday, and then Tuesday at the SCG and MCG, we found the very first person who bought a Crick Rush NFT in Sydney and the very first person who bought a Crick Rush NFT in Melbourne, and gave them a call and said, here are your hospitality tickets. You're going to come early and watch the team warm up outside of the boundary rope. And they had a fantastic time, and like the ability to just kind of do that and know exactly who they are. And we knew that guy had 11 NFTs and that he had bought and sold this many, and he played this many D3 club games during the World Cup. And and then he and his wife came and had a great afternoon and got to meet Steve Smith, which was a surprise to us too. So it was an extra bonus.
You're going to be the one that has to tell Rochelle that we're rebranding to Digital Collectible Fest.
Yeah.
Because I'm not. All right,
it is a bit of a mouthful.
Rid, over to you.
I think it's on brands like us as sporting brands or major brands who have very valuable, trustworthy IP in the market to use the technology for good, essentially. So, and I think that helps us build momentum in the market. It helps us quash some of those skepticisms that come with things like the FTX saga that's been going on and some of the rug pulls that happen in market and some of the NFT projects out there that are literally just come and go. And I think one of the really critical aspects of what we're trying to do with our project is move it to more of a membership base where people see that they get value out of being a member of that community, and they can come and go at any stage. They don't have to stay there. What we also want to do is make sure we're thinking about it commercially, because we are a commercial business and we can't just be losing money on a project like this. So we need to continue to keep it going, continue to keep benefiting the consumer or the holder at the end of the day, but also think about it in a way that can continue on for years to come and continue to give benefit to us and the consumer at the end of the day. So when we originally minted, as we said earlier on, we focused on a very Web3 community because the audience that follows tennis majority of the time is an older, mostly female demographic. And we know that very diligently over the last sort of 10, 20 years. It has slightly been coming down and slightly been skewing male, but certainly nowhere near what a typical NFT Web3 audience would be. So I think that was another one of the reasons as well.
Amazing.
And I think for us, utility continues to be the conversation that garners or dismisses the attention that we have from our fans. And we've learned a few things about what real utility is for us through this process. I mean, I think the temptation for sporting organisations is, when we talk about utility, is to immediately go to our players and say, here's some all access to the different players that we have. But the challenge I think that exists with that is that player access, or the ability to access players, for us, I don't necessarily think that's something that we want gated by NFT. So even though it's a really quick and easy win, we want our players to be in the community. We want our teams to be able to have fan days and have their players accessible. And if we kind of turn around and say, well, if you want to meet this person, you're going to have to own this NFT, it can sometimes fuel the antipathy that people have towards the space. And so we're a little bit cautious about what utility actually represents. And one of the things that we've learned as we've had this conversation is, I mentioned before about how NFTs for us are likely to, we're likely to see more of our base if they can solve some real life problems. So, rather than having utility, which is to the effect of come and meet these different players, we're thinking about things like, how can the blockchain, for example, speed up the queue at the beer line? Like that type of things. Like what are the real life problems that people have on game day that the blockchain could solve? And NFTs might not necessarily look cool to the person, the casual on the outside, but when you're standing in a bit long beer line and you see these whole bunch of people walking right past you, knowing that they have NFTs that allow, that's the type of thinking where we're like, okay, let's think a little bit differently about what utility looks like. And as we've had these discussions during discovery, it's really opened up our eyes to what we would kind of put out there in market, which is also a little bit of the reason why we haven't released anything just yet.
I want to talk about, one of the unlocks for me personally, we spoke about Top Shot already, but it was sort of like I collected a lot of NBA basketball cards, hoops, Upper Deck, Fleer, all of that, and it was like, oh, this is my childhood reincarnated, but digitally, and that's, the blockchain, alleviates all the fudders out there, right-click, save this, or save that. In terms of sort of just the numbers that you're putting out and the quantity and the tokenomics of your NFT collections, do you feel pressure in these early stages to make sure that there's not an oversupply so that, that you're not essentially diluting the market? Because we're sort of seeing that with some of the other sports in the US, that's been a little bit of a problem. Do you feel that pressure to get that right initially?
So I think we did when we were thinking of going with Moments first.
Yep.
So when we thought Moments would be our first thing, we did talk a lot about making sure we were putting out the right amount, the right era, the balance between kind of the current players and the past players, and not wanting to kind of open up the vault in the first month of having the program and, release some of our greatest moments before we really built up kind of the marketplace. We have a totally different thinking about kind of the tokenomics now, because everything really that I think we've had across these, handful of pack drops has been geared towards the liquidity of the marketplace for the online game. And so that's actually really driven. So I guess we're kind of letting the demand and the volume of turnover that we're seeing and the people that are engaging in that kind of play to earn game set the tone for the volumes of pack drops that we'll be having across the season.
Yep.
So I think we've let the users kind of tell us, at least for this time. But I do think it is worth considering when you have such a rich history. And, we have digitized archives back to 1971 that with a touch of a button, I can go in 10 seconds and find every single clip where a cricket ball hits a bird across the last 30 years. It's incredible what we can pick out. But yeah, you want to be really careful and respectful of that archive. You don't just want to throw it out there for the sake of having it out there. You want it to be a meaningful release, a meaningful kind of engagement with the fan base, and bring it out for a reason, not just for the sake of trying to sell NFTs.
Yeah. Rid, do you have footage on how many times Rafa's picked his wedgie? Or?
Oh, God. Terabytes worth. I think supply and demand is, it's a very fine art to get right, particularly in a market that has so many fluctuations and so many intricacies to it. And like we see in Discords, the whole movement towards a specific project, whether it be up or down, can change in a matter of minutes. It happens so quickly. I think we've all probably had that experience at times. But we're also very lucky in the sense that because we are experimenting with the technology right now, we do have the ability to make those decisions on the fly, and we're not locked into anything that has to be done a certain way because it was done this way before. So when we release our next collection in the next few weeks, that'll be significantly lower than the original collection, but it'll also be in addition to the original collection. And that's part of our mentality of commercial sustainability that we want going forward. But then there's elements of obviously supply and demand based on the artwork, the utility, the market sentiment. FTX doesn't help us at the moment. We went to market with press over the last few days and had a lot of return emails saying we simply won't write about this right now. There's too much press on FTX. So getting that right over the next 4 weeks is going to be really important for us in the lead up to January.
We're mindful of it, but we don't feel any additional pressure other than the pressure that we put on ourselves on it. I really enjoyed the metaverse conversation that happened here yesterday, and we think about the metaverse a little bit when it comes to the NRL and where we want to be in the future. And the best short explanation of the metaverse that I've ever heard given was that the metaverse is really the internet that we live in rather than the internet we browse. Which I think was pulled out by a Reddit user and kind of stolen and popularized by Mark Zuckerberg. But when understood that way, the internet that we live in rather than the internet we browse, the possibilities for us and for all of us become a lot bigger and a lot better, but there is still that mindful conversation about how much you're putting out there. And it's definitely something we think about too.
Amazing. All right, we are getting close to time, but I want to throw 2 more questions to you three. Rapid fire ones. The first one I want to ask is, in 3 years' time, what is the percentage or the approximate percentage of your fan base that will own one of your NFTs from your organisation? Just a ballpark approximate figure. Start with you, Joan.
3 years' time.
In 3 years. Actually on November 24th.
All right, let's mark it in our calendars. 35%? Or are we talking Australian or are we talking global?
Global. We've had global speakers here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, easy to say like 35 to 40%, but we're really blessed in that we're a sport that's very popular in the subcontinent, and they're really huge adopters of this technology.
Okay, 35 to 40%. Rid?
I think we know that our collection will be in 3 years' time, probably around 15 to 16,000 art balls in the collection. We have a following globally of 900 million people, so it's a very small percentage.
Yeah.
But I also think that we want an element of exclusivity at the moment, because what we offer to that community is an element of exclusivity. So we don't want that to necessarily just be everyone. I think when we originally minted the project as well, and this probably goes back to the last question, conscious that we're running out of time, that we didn't just go with 10,000 moments, 10,000 NFTs. We had a story behind how we created the 6,776 and what that meant to us as a project. So I think as we continue to grow that, it's really important that we always stick to the moments and the storytelling that made our project what it was, and don't just go mass market because we can.
Yeah. Just before Jards answers that, does anyone own the 1997 AO logo AO art ball? Is anyone in this room? Because if you do, I will give you 3 ETH for it. I have been trying to hunt that down since mint, so if anyone knows, please let me know. But back to you.
The percentage?
Yeah, percentage.
Are we recording?
Yes, over here.
We are recording? Okay, well, in that case, I think, to be honest, we don't know. I don't know what the percentage would be. I will say that ideally, I would like that number to be an identical number or more to the number of members that we have of the NRL, if you know what I mean.
Okay, excellent. All right, last one. Joan, starting with you, and you can use Crick Rush as the answer. Your favourite NFT in your personal collection?
In my personal collection?
In your personal collection.
It's a Bricktopian that Alex is building.
Oh, nice.
That was kind of he's my penny drop moment of chatting with Alex's building, is when I really kind of dove into this space like on a personal level, and so that's probably, it took me ages to get one.
So I did you a tremendous favour by putting Alex literally at 3 o'clock in the other room. So,
Will everyone tell him that I mentioned it?
Shout out to Alex, and if you know room. Rid, your favourite NFT in your collection?
Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to own an AO art ball. The data that we use is an integrity reason, so I have access to that data before anyone else, so unfortunately I can't. That would be my answer though. Look, that's a really hard question. There's so many so many different things that I have. I do own a deed in Other Side, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens there. I think the Bored Ape Yacht Club guys are progressing at such a rate and such a build pace in this market right now that I'm really excited to see where that goes. So we'll see.
Judge, you know if you don't answer NF teams, you're going to get...
Mine actually is my NF team that I have there. I do own a Bored Ape from the OG Bored Ape theme, but my favourite Bored Ape is actually this derivative from the NF teams collection, and it's a little bit more sporty, which I think is a little bit more me. And the only reason that this is there and not my actual photo was because I was travelling at the time, and I was saying to my kids, I'm going down to Melbourne, but I gave them the wrong photo, so they took this. And one of them said, don't worry, Dad, looks the same as your real photo anyways. Okay. I'm going to stay out an extra night now for that. But NF teams, that's my favourite one.
Amazing. Shout out to my podcast host at Day 25 who couldn't make it this week. But give everyone a round of applause up on the stage. Thank you so much to Joan, Ridley, and Jards. Thank you, guys.